The alien Queen Lyriath sat in her grand chamber, gazing out across her empire. The once thriving world was now plagued by a disease that had no cure. The virus spread quickly, leaving entire cities in ruin, and there was no sign of it slowing down. The air in her palace felt thick with the weight of fear. Her people were dying, and she had no way to stop it. Lyriath had ruled with strength and wisdom for centuries. Her empire was vast, with many planets under her control, each flourishing with life. But now, it seemed as though everything she had worked for was slipping through her fingers. The disease was unlike anything she had seen before. It spread, without warning, leaving its victims weak and unable to fight back. Even the strongest among her people were falling. As the queen, she was expected to have all the answers. But for the first time in her life, Lyriath felt helpless. Her people depended on her, and yet she could not save them. She had consulted every healer, scientist, and doctor in her empire, but nothing had worked. The disease was beyond their knowledge, and no one could provide a cure. Lyriath's heart sank as she looked out over the dying world. In the quiet of the night, the queen sat alone in her chamber, thinking of what could be done. She had tried everything she could think of, but there was still no hope. Her mind raced as she thought of other options. Then it came to her. There was one final chance. Humanity. Lyriath had heard stories of the humans, a species from a distant planet known as Earth. They were a young race, full of energy and unpredictability, but they were also fierce warriors. The humans had fought in countless battles, defeating enemies that were much stronger than them. They had an almost unexplainable will to survive. Lyriath had heard rumors of their resilience, their ability to face even the most impossible odds. Perhaps, just perhaps, the humans could help her. Lyriath was not one to trust easily, but desperate times called for desperate measures. She had a choice to make. If the humans had the strength and courage the stories claimed, they might be her only hope. She quickly sent out a message, one that would reach the farthest corners of the galaxy. It was a call for help, a desperate plea for assistance in curing the disease that was ravaging her empire. She did not know if the humans would respond, but she had to try, as she sent the message. Lyriath's thoughts turned to the warrior who would lead the humans to her. She did not know who would come, but she imagined him to be someone strong, someone willing to risk everything for a stranger's cause. It had to be someone who understood the value of sacrifice, someone who knew what it meant to fight against overwhelming odds. She had no idea if such a person even existed. But she had to believe that there was still hope. On Earth, Captain Jonathan Miller stood at attention in front of his commanding officer. He had been a soldier for most of his life, fighting in wars. Across different planets, humanity had its own struggles, but it had always been a warrior race. Jonathan was no stranger to battle. He had faced down enemies far stronger than himself, and yet he had always survived. The call came in the middle of the night, a request for help from an alien empire in a distant galaxy. Jonathan was skeptical at first. He had heard rumors of alien races reaching out to humans for aid, but he had never believed in the stories. The humans, while strong, were still young compared to many other species in the galaxy. Yet, something about this call felt different. There was a desperation in the voice that caught his attention. This wasn't a typical request for help. This was a cry for survival. Captain Miller, his commanding officer, said, "The Queen of the Valian Empire has reached out. She needs our help. Her people are dying from a disease that no one can cure. We need to respond. The galaxy is depending on us." Jonathan looked at the screen, where the image of the Queen appeared. She was regal, her long silver hair flowing around her face. Her deep purple eyes held a look of sorrow and determination. She was clearly struggling, but her resolve was unshakable. Jonathan didn't need to be told twice. He had seen too many. People suffer to ignore a plea like this. "I'll go," he said. "I'll do whatever it takes to help her." His commanding officer nodded. "Good. Prepare for departure. We'll be traveling to the Valian Empire to find a cure for their people." As Jonathan prepared for the mission, he could not shake the feeling that this would be unlike any other assignment he had taken. The queen was asking for help, but what if there was no way to save her people? What if the disease was too far gone? And what would it mean for him, a human, to step into the heart of an alien empire? But there was no time for doubt. The journey ahead would be dangerous, and Jonathan knew the stakes were high. He was ready for the challenge, but he also couldn't help but wonder if he was about to embark on something far greater than a simple rescue mission. Little did he know that this mission would not only test his strength and courage, but it would change the course of history forever. Captain Jonathan Miller stood in front of the massive transport ship, watching as the engine hummed and the crew scrambled to complete their final preparations. The Valian Empire was on the other side of the galaxy, and the journey would take several days. The thought of leaving Earth behind for such a faraway place made Jonathan uneasy, but duty called. He was a soldier, and soldiers followed orders. As he entered the ship, Jonathan was met by his commanding officer, Captain Cole, who briefed him once more on the mission. "The Queen of the Valian Empire has made it clear," Captain Cole said. "Her people are dying and they need help. We don't know much about their disease, but we'll figure it out when we get there. Your main task is to assist the Queen directly. They believe human medical knowledge might hold the key to finding a cure." Jonathan nodded, feeling the weight of the responsibility. "Understood. I'll do my best." The journey through space was long, and Jonathan spent most of the time in his quarters, mentally preparing for what lay ahead. The idea of interacting with an alien queen felt strange to him. They had fought against alien enemies before, but this was different. The Valian queen wasn't a threat. She was a leader, desperate to save her people. When the ship finally arrived at the Valian capital, Jonathan's mind raced. The planet was beautiful, with rich green forests, sparkling oceans, and shining cities that stretched toward the sky. It looked like a world full of life and potential. And yet, beneath the surface, there was fear, a fear of death that loomed over every corner. As Jonathan disembarked, he was greeted by alien soldiers, their tall, slender bodies glowing faintly. In the dim light, their faces were calm, but their eyes held a sadness that Jonathan couldn't ignore. The Valian people were clearly suffering, and their queen had called on him for help. He was escorted through the palace, which was massive and elegant, with towering spires and intricate designs carved into the walls. The architecture was unlike anything Jonathan had ever seen, with flowing curves and shimmering metal that seemed to change color as he moved. Finally, they reached the throne room. The doors opened, and there, sitting on a grand throne, was Queen Lyriath. She was beautiful, in a way that was both alien and familiar. Her long silver hair flowed like liquid light, and her purple eyes shone with intelligence and sorrow. She wore a crown of delicate crystal, and her robes were made of fine, shimmering fabric that seemed to ripple with every movement. Her regal appearance, there was a noticeable weariness about her, a weakness that Jonathan had not expected. She was not the fierce warrior he had imagined, but a leader burdened by the weight of her people's suffering. As Jonathan entered the room, their eyes met. Her gaze was intense, searching, as if trying to measure him, to see if he was the one who could save them all. "Captain Miller," she said in a voice that was both soothing and commanding. "I am Queen Lyriath. Thank you for coming." Jonathan gave a small bow, trying to hide the uncertainty that threatened to show. "Your Majesty, I'm here to help in any way I can." She nodded, but there was no smile. Her face was full of worry. "I hope you can. The disease has already taken so much from us. My people are dying, and I fear it is only a matter of time before I lose everything." Jonathan stepped forward, his eyes scanning the room. "What is this disease, and why do you think I can help?" Lyriath's gaze turned toward the window, where the stars of her empire twinkled in the vastness of space. "We do not know where it came from. It is unlike anything we have encountered. It moves quickly, affecting the body's energy systems, draining life from our people. We have tried everything to cure it, but nothing works. It is as if the disease is alive, learning from every attempt we make. Our healers cannot stop it." Jonathan felt a pit form in his stomach. The situation was dire, and yet the Queen's calm demeanor only made the urgency more real. And you think the humans can help? With all due respect, I'm no doctor. A soldier. Lirith looked at him, her eyes softening for a moment. It is not just your medical knowledge we need. It is your will. I have studied your people, Captain. Humans are survivors. You find ways to defeat the impossible. It is that strength, that determination, that we need. Can find a way to save my empire? Jonathan stared at her, taking in her words. He had seen his people fight against overwhelming odds, but this was different. This wasn't about battle. It was about saving lives. I'll do everything I can, Jonathan said, his voice steady. I'll fight for your people, your queen. Just tell me what needs to be done. Lirith rose from her throne, her long robe flowing. Behind her, there was a rare plant, only found on the planet Zalanus. The ingredients from this plant could create a cure. But the planet is dangerous, filled with creatures that have not been seen for centuries. Only the strongest and most skilled can survive there. Jonathan straightened his back, determination flashing in his eyes. Then we'll go to Zalanus. I'll make sure we get what we need. Lirith gave a slight nod, as if she were relieved to have found someone willing to take on such a perilous task. Thank you, Captain. You do not know how much this means to me. As Jonathan left the throne room, he couldn't shake the feeling that this mission was much more than it appeared. The stakes were high, and the fate of an entire empire rested on his shoulders. But one thing was clear. He wasn't just fighting for his own survival. He was fighting for the survival of a people who had never known him. A queen who had placed her trust in him, and he would not let them down. Captain Jonathan Miller stood at the edge of the Valian spaceport, the ground beneath his boots humming with the energy of the busy alien city. The plan was simple. Travel to the distant planet Zalanus, find the rare plant, and return to save the Queen's people. But nothing about this mission felt simple. The stakes were high, and the pressure weighed on him with every step. The spaceport was a bustling hub, filled with beings of all shapes and sizes. Alien ships glided in and out, their sleek designs reflecting the advanced technology of the Valian Empire. Yet, despite the vibrant activity around him, Jonathan felt a quiet sense of isolation. He was surrounded by strangers beings whose customs, language, and very existence were unfamiliar to him. Are you ready? Lirith's voice cut through the noise. She had arrived with a small group of her trusted soldiers, her presence commanding and elegant as always. But this time, there was a quiet sadness in her eyes that Jonathan couldn't ignore. He turned to face her. I am. Let's get this done. She nodded, her gaze hardening with determination. Zalanus is not a place for the faint of heart. You will face dangers unlike anything you've seen before. But you must succeed. For my people. Jonathan met her eyes. There was no room for doubt in her voice. I'll do whatever it takes. Together, they boarded a sleek transport ship, designed for speed and agility. The ship's interior was unlike anything Jonathan had seen before, with smooth organic curves and holographic interfaces that seemed to respond to the slightest touch. As the ship lifted off the ground, the city below shrank into the distance, and the stars above grew closer. The journey to Zalanus was long, with the ship cutting through the vastness of space. As they traveled, Jonathan found himself deep in thought. He had never been so far from Earth before. He had fought battles on distant planets, but none of them had ever felt so personal. This mission wasn't about winning a war or defeating an enemy. It was about saving lives. It was about saving the Queen and her empire. In the quiet moments of the journey, Jonathan couldn't help but think of Lirith. She was unlike any leader he had ever met. Her strength was undeniable, but there was a vulnerability to her that he hadn't expected. She carried the weight of her empire's survival on her shoulders, and yet she still had the courage to trust a human warrior. He wondered if she believed in him the way she said she did, or if she was simply desperate for any hope. When they finally arrived at Zalanus, Jonathan's heart raced. The planet's surface was covered in dense forests and rugged mountains, a wild and untamed place. The atmosphere was thick, and the air smelled of damp earth and strange plants. Stay close. Lirith's voice came through his earpiece. Zalanus is home to many dangers. The creatures here are fierce, and the terrain is treacherous. Jonathan nodded, adjusting his gear. His military training kicked in as he prepared for the journey ahead. He would protect Liriath, no matter what the two of them, along with a small group of Valian soldiers, set out into the dense jungle. The plants were unlike anything Jonathan had ever seen: brightly colored flowers, strange vines, and towering trees with twisting branches that seemed to reach out like fingers. Every step felt unfamiliar, and every sound seemed amplified in the quiet of the jungle. As they moved deeper into the forest, Jonathan couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. He scanned the surroundings, his senses on high, alert. The air was thick with tension, and every rustle in the trees made his hand instinctively reach for his weapon. Then, suddenly the ground beneath them shook. A massive roar echoed through the jungle, sending birds scattering into the sky. Jonathan's heart raced. He knew this wasn't just a wild animal, it was something much more dangerous. "Move," Liriath shouted. She took the lead, her alien soldiers following closely behind her. Jonathan kept pace, his eyes constantly scanning the trees for any sign of the creature. Without warning, a giant creature lunged from the shadows. It was massive, with armored plates covering its body, and its eyes glowed with a fierce, predatory hunger. The beast's claws scraped the ground as it charged at them, its teeth bared in a snarl. Jonathan fired his weapon, but the creature seemed unaffected, its thick hide shrugging off the shots. Liriath was already ahead, her sword drawn and glowing with a strange energy. She swung it with precision, cutting through the air. The creature roared in pain, but it didn't retreat. Jonathan's heart pounded in his chest as he joined the fight, using his military training to work alongside the Valian soldiers. They were skilled, but this creature was unlike any enemy Jonathan had faced before. It moved too quickly, too unpredictably. Liriath's voice rang out above the chaos. "We need to reach the plant. Keep fighting, Captain." His focus shifting. The plant was the key to saving her people. He couldn't afford to let anything stop him. Together, they fought with everything they had, slowly pushing the creature back. Minutes felt like hours, but finally, with a last powerful blow from Liriath, the creature fell to the ground. The jungle fell silent once more. Jonathan's breath came in heavy gasps. Liriath stood over the creature, her expression fierce. That was only the first of many challenges. But we are closer now. The plant is nearby. Jonathan wiped the sweat from his brow, his mind focused on the task ahead. He had come here to save the Queen's people. He wasn't about to let anything stand in his way. As they pressed on through the jungle, the sense of danger only grew stronger. The creatures of Zalonis were relentless, but Jonathan was determined. With Liriath by his side, he knew they could overcome whatever obstacles lay ahead. Together, they would save the Queen's empire. Together, they would face whatever came next. Jonathan's heart pounded in his chest as they moved deeper into the jungle of Zalonis. The air was thick with humidity, and the ground beneath them was uneven, making each step a struggle. The further they went, the more intense the sense of danger became. The creatures that inhabited this planet were relentless, and Jonathan could feel their eyes on him, watching, waiting for the right moment to strike. He glanced over at Liriath, who was moving with ease, her steps sure and steady. Despite the harsh terrain, she was a warrior, born for this world, while Jonathan was a soldier out of his element. He had fought in countless battles, but this was different. This was survival. This was a race against time. "We're almost there," Liriath said, her voice calm despite the tension in the air. Her eyes scanned the surroundings, never stopping for a moment. The plant is located in a clearing just beyond the ridge. Jonathan nodded, but his eyes never left the jungle around them. Every rustle in the leaves, every distant growl, sent a surge of adrenaline through his veins. He couldn't afford to relax, not for a second. Suddenly, a loud roar echoed through the jungle, followed by the sound of heavy footsteps. Jonathan froze. Liriath's eyes narrowed, and she motioned for him to stay quiet. "Get down," she whispered. They crouched low to the ground, blending into the thick underbrush as the massive creature approached. Jonathan could hear its breathing, heavy and labored. He could smell the wet earth, and the sharp scent of the creature's skin was close to close. Jonathan's hand gripped the hilt of his weapon, ready to fight, but Liriath shook her. Head weight, she mouthed. The creature came into view, massive, with spiked armor covering its back and sharp clawed feet that dug into the ground with every step. Its eyes were glowing a fierce red as it sniffed the air, searching for them. Jonathan's pulse raced, but he kept his breath steady. Trying not to make a sound, Lirith moved closer to him, her eyes locked on the creature. The moment it passed by, she stood up quickly, drawing her glowing sword with a sharp, fluid motion. The creature turned, sensing the movement, and let out another terrifying roar. Without hesitation, Lirith lunged forward, her sword flashing through the air. Jonathan didn't wait for her to give the order. He jumped into action, firing his weapon at the creature. The blast hit its armor, but it barely slowed down. The creature charged toward them, its claws outstretched, eager to tear them apart. Move. Lirith shouted. Jonathan ran with her, ducking behind a large tree to avoid the creature's strike. The battle was fierce, and they were outnumbered. More creatures appeared from the jungle, drawn by the sound of the fight. They were closing in, and Jonathan could see that Lirith was tiring. She had already fought the first creature, and now she was facing 3 more. Each one more vicious than the last. Jonathan's mind raced. They needed to get to the clearing. That was their only hope. Lirith, he yelled, his voice strained. We can't keep fighting them. We have to reach the plant. I know, she replied through gritted teeth, cutting through one of the creatures with a swift blow. But we can't leave the area unprotected. They'll follow us. Jonathan's eyes darted around. The creatures were closing in. They were surrounded. If they didn't act fast, they would be overwhelmed. Without thinking, Jonathan made a snap decision. He turned and ran toward the clearing, trusting Lirith to follow. The moment he broke through the thick brush, the sounds of the creatures seemed to fade. He looked around and saw the plant. It was beautiful, glowing softly in the dim light of the jungle, its petals shimmering in a shade of blue unlike anything he had ever seen. The plant was the key. But as Jonathan reached for it, a shadow loomed behind him. One of the creatures had followed. Jonathan spun around, raising his weapon, but the creature was faster. It lunged at him, its claws raking through the air. He barely managed to dodge the attack, but the creature's sharp talons tore into his arm, sending a wave of pain through his body. He stumbled back, losing his balance. The creature moved in for the kill. Jonathan, Lirith's voice rang out. She appeared from behind a tree, her sword raised high. With a quick, decisive strike, she drove her sword into the creature's neck, severing its head in a single motion. Jonathan collapsed to the ground, breathing heavily as the creature's body fell beside him. His arm throbbed with pain, but he didn't care. He had made it. They had made it. Lirith knelt beside him, her eyes scanning his injury. You're hurt, she said, her voice soft with concern. We don't have much time. I'll be fine, Jonathan grunted, pushing himself to his feet. We have what we came for. Lirith stood and turned to the plant, her eyes focused on the glowing petals. With delicate fingers, she carefully harvested the plant, taking only what was needed for the cure. She placed it in a small pouch and turned back to Jonathan. We have to return to the palace, she said, her voice determined. There's no more time to waste. Jonathan nodded, though his body ached. The battle had been harder than he expected, but they had what they needed. They could save the Queen's people now. Together, they made their way back through the jungle, moving quickly despite the dangers around them. As they approached the ship, Jonathan glanced at Lirith. The Queen had been a symbol of strength, but in that moment, he saw something more, something deeper. She wasn't just a leader, she was a survivor. And now, with the cure in their hands, they could save her empire. The journey back to the Valian Palace felt much longer than it should have. Jonathan's injury throbbed with every step, the pain making it harder to focus on anything else. The jungle had tested them in ways he hadn't expected, but they had survived, and now they had the plant. They had what they needed to save Lirith's people. Yet, as they approached the palace, Jonathan couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. There was a tense stillness in the air, a quiet that seemed to speak of danger. His instincts told him that the worst was still ahead. Something's wrong, Jonathan muttered, glancing around as they approached the palace gates. Lirith looked. Up at the palace, her face set in a hard line. "You're right," she said, her voice low. "I can feel it too." The gates opened, and they were met by a group of Valian soldiers who quickly escorted them inside. Lirith led the way, her steps quick and purposeful. Jonathan followed closely behind her, his mind still on the strange feeling that had settled in his gut. They entered the main chamber of the palace, where Lirith's council waited. But the moment they stepped inside, the atmosphere shifted. There was a chill in the air, and the faces of the council members were filled with a cold, silent anger. The room was tense, filled with unspoken words. "What is this?" Jonathan asked. Sensing the shift in the mood, Lirith turned to him, her eyes narrowing. "It seems my people have lost faith in me," she said quietly. "They see the disease as a curse, and many have begun to question my ability to lead." Jonathan understood immediately. A weakened queen was a target for those who wanted power. If Lirith couldn't save her people, some of the council members might try to seize control. "You must do something," Jonathan said, his voice filled with urgency. "Your people need you." Lirith nodded, but the weight of the situation was clear in her eyes. She was tired, physically and emotionally drained from the constant battle against the disease. But she wasn't going to give up. Not now. When everything she had worked for was on the line. "I will go to them," she said, straightening her back. Jonathan watched her, knowing that this wasn't going to be easy. But he also knew that Lirith had the strength of a leader. She had to believe that her people would follow her, even in their darkest hour. As they walked toward the council room, the tension grew. Jonathan stayed by her side, ready for anything. When they entered the room, Lirith faced the council members, her eyes never wavering. She spoke in a calm, commanding tone. "My people," she said, "I know many of you have doubts, but I have returned with the cure for our disease. We will heal, and we will rise again." A murmur ran through the room, but there was no applause, no cheers, only silence. Jonathan felt the weight of the council's judgment as they waited for Lirith to explain further, but before she could continue, one of the council members, General Corin, a tall and imposing figure, stepped forward, his expression cold. "You speak of healing, Lirith," he said, his voice dripping with disdain, "but we no longer believe in your leadership. We have lost too much, and now you return with some human soldier in a plant. What good will that do?"
Ow.
Lirith's eyes flashed with anger, but she held her ground. "I have not returned empty-handed. The plant I brought will cure us, but it will only work if we work together. We must put our trust in each other if we want to survive." Corin's lip curled into a sneer. "You failed us, Lirith. You're weak, and now you expect us to follow you? We will find another way." Jonathan felt a surge of anger at Corin's words. The general's arrogance was enough to make anyone furious, but he held his tongue, knowing that this was Lirith's fight, not his. Lirith's gaze turned cold, and her voice hardened. "You are wrong, Corin. I have fought for my people every day. I've seen the suffering, and I've seen the fear. But I will not let you tear my empire apart because of your pride." The room fell silent as Lirith stepped forward, her eyes locking with Corin's. Jonathan could see the determination in her stance. She wasn't going to back down. But the council's resistance was a powerful force. If Lirith couldn't win them over, it could cost her the empire. Suddenly, Corin's voice rose again, more forceful this time. "Enough, Lirith. God, if you truly want to save us, you must prove yourself. We will not follow you unless you make the ultimate sacrifice." Lirith's expression faltered for a moment, and Jonathan's heart raced. But he had to stay calm for her. This was part of the game now, the political struggle for power. "What are you asking?" Lirith's voice was steady, though Jonathan could see the uncertainty in her eyes. "You must give up your crown," Corin said, his voice cold and calculated. "If you truly believe in your people, you will step down and allow a new ruler to take charge. Only then will we trust your plan for salvation." Jonathan's heart sank. This was a cruel test designed to break Lirith's will. He knew she couldn't give up the crown. It's not after everything she had been through. But he also knew she wouldn't back down. She couldn't let her people fall into chaos. Lirith stood tall, her face set in determination. I will not give up my crown. I will not abandon my people. If you believe in this empire, you will follow me, crown, or no crown. For a moment, the room was still. Then, to Jonathan's surprise, the council members slowly began to nod. Corin's face was hard, but he didn't challenge Lirith further. The room was quiet for a long time, but it was clear that Lirith's words had struck a chord with some of her council. She had fought for her people, and now, it seemed, they were ready to fight with her. Prepare the cure, Corin finally said, his voice quiet, though there was no warmth in his words. We will see if this works. Jonathan looked at Lirith, who was standing strong, her face resolute. She had made the ultimate sacrifice, her trust, her crown, her future. She had put everything on the line for her people. Now, it was up to them to trust her and to save her empire. The palace was silent as Lirith and Jonathan moved through the halls. The weight of the moment hung in the air like a heavy fog. The cure was ready, but the council's decision to trust Lirith again was fragile. It had not been easy to gain their approval, but now, with the plant's essence prepared, there was a small chance that it could save the Valiant Empire. Jonathan glanced over at Lirith. She was still strong, but he could see the toll the situation had taken on her. Strain of leading an empire through such a dark time had left her weary, her face marked with the fatigue of endless worry. But despite everything, she refused to give up. She couldn't afford to. They reached the central chamber, where the council members were gathered. The room was filled with tension, but now there was a glimmer of hope. The Valiant people had already begun to show signs of recovery in the outer parts of the empire. But it was here, in the heart of the palace, where the most important test would take place. Lirith's survival meant everything to them. The council was watching her closely. The healer stood near a stone altar, the plant's glowing essence carefully contained in a crystal vial. Jonathan stepped forward, but Lirith stopped him. With a hand on his arm, "You've already given so much," she said, her voice softer now. "Let me finish this." Jonathan nodded, though the idea of letting her go through with it alone left him uneasy. He couldn't deny the connection that had grown between them. This mission had become more than just about saving her people. He had come to care for her deeply. The thought of losing her was something he couldn't bear. Lirith moved to the altar, her hands steady as she poured the plant's essence into a ceremonial bowl. The room grew even quieter as the healing energy began to fill the air, a soft glow that illuminated the chamber in a warm, comforting light. Lirith closed her eyes, focusing on the ritual, knowing that this was the final step to saving her empire. The council watched in silence, some with hope, others with skepticism. They had seen leaders fall before, and they knew how fragile their world could be. Lirith's future was uncertain, but this was her last chance to prove herself. The cure had to work. "Please," she whispered, her voice a prayer to the gods. "Of her people, let this work." Jonathan stood back, his eyes never leaving her. It was hard to explain, but he felt a deep sense of admiration for her, how she had remained calm and strong in the face of impossible odds. The queen was not just a ruler, she was a warrior, and she had fought for her people every step of the way. The healer stepped forward with a syringe, ready to administer the cure. The air was thick with anticipation, and Jonathan held his breath as the healer gently injected the solution into Lirith's bloodstream. For a long moment, nothing happened. Lirith stood still, her eyes closed as the room waited in absolute silence. Then, slowly, a subtle shift occurred. The color in Lirith's face began to return, her skin glowing with a gentle warmth. It was as though the cure was working, flooding her body with the strength she had lost over the past few weeks. The council members exchanged looks of surprise, some even gasping as they witnessed the transformation. The queen was healing before their eyes. Jonathan stepped forward cautiously, could see the change happening. Lirith was alive, more than just physically, but her strength was returning. Her posture was taller now, the exhaustion from her face melting away as the cure took effect. The healer smiled, nodding in approval. "It is working, my queen. You are free of the disease." Lirith opened her eyes, her expression soft but filled with determination. What? It is not just me who has been healed. It is my people. We will rebuild. The room erupted into a murmur of approval, the council members moving closer to the queen as if they were seeing her for the first time. The doubts they had harbored were gone now, replaced with admiration and respect. Lirith had done what no one else could. She had saved them all. But Jonathan knew that the battle wasn't over. The council was not the only challenge Lirith faced. There were enemies beyond the palace walls, factions that had been waiting for this moment of weakness. The disease might have been cured, but there were still battles to fight to secure the future of the empire. Your Majesty, Corin? The general who had once challenged Lirith's leadership stepped forward. His voice was different, nor respectful, even humble. I see now the strength that lies within you. You have done what we thought was impossible. If the empire is yours, as it always should have been, Lirith's gaze was steady. We are all in this together. The empire belongs to the people, not to any one person. I will lead them, but it will take all of us to rebuild. Jonathan felt a small sense of relief. The road ahead would be difficult, but Lirith had earned the trust of her people, and with the cure in hand, she had given them a chance to survive, a chance to rise above the darkness that had threatened to consume them. The council, now united behind her, began to discuss the steps they would take to ensure the recovery of the empire. But Jonathan's thoughts drifted to the future. He had come to this distant world to help Lirith, but what he had found was something far greater than a mission. He had found a leader, a warrior, a person who had earned his respect. As the discussion continued, Lirith turned to Jonathan, her eyes meeting his with a soft smile. Thank you, she said quietly. I could not have done this without you. Jonathan smiled back, the weight of the moment settling into his chest. We did this together, he said. Your people will be safe now. And in that moment, amidst the quiet hum of the palace, Jonathan knew that their journey wasn't over. It was just beginning.